One of the interesting things about disaster is when disasters occur, that kind of pulls a sheet or the cover off of social inequality. That's the key thing to take away from this, that people then are put under a lot of stress, and they can go two ways. They can distrust everyone around them. They can hunker down and try to survive on their own. And generally, the social inequalities break this way, that the people who have more tend to recover faster. They have more access to decision makers, people who control resources, and they know how to work the system. And people who have less tend to take longer to recover. They suffer more at the time. The reason I started to intensify my interest in disaster and media is that my father, who was already a widower by this time in 2005, decided he wasn't going to evacuate from New Orleans as this megastorm was bearing down on the Gulf Coast and specifically New Orleans. There had not been a major storm to hit New Orleans since 1965 when I was away in college, and that was Betsy. Betsy did not do nearly the kind of damage to New Orleans, both human and physical, that Katrina would, because this big hand is pushing a wall of water up these different waterways. And they'd also neglected to maintain the levees and flood walls in and around New Orleans. So some of those failed during Katrina, and my father got out of bed after the main part of the storm had passed over, and he had a carpet, just like we have here in the studio. His feet touched the carpet, and the carpet was wet. So water was already coming into the house, and it was coming in a slow fashion. He heard a loud noise. He went toward the front door and saw water surging through a mail slot in the door. So that meant that there was a flash flood happening. And he had taken a lot of memorabilia out of a storage locker, sports memorabilia for the most part. And he was a sports journalist as well as a college professor. But anyway, so his first instinct was to try to put that on higher locations in the house rather than to try to save himself. And he realized that the water was coming in faster and faster. He realized, let me get out of here. And he went toward the carport and looked at his car, and the water was up to the door handles. And so the car wasn't going to go anywhere. As a matter of fact, the car was going to probably start floating any minute. So he had to do what we suggested he might have to do, which was to retreat into the attic. And I had told him, you need to make sure you take a hammer up there, because the water may not stop when it gets to the floor of the attic. It may keep coming in, and you'd be trapped there. So he didn't have to break through the roof, but he was there 2 days and 2 nights, and we didn't know where he was for 5 days. Eventually, I moved into another area which I'm continuing to work on, which was the environment, and I taught a class on environmental communication, and became interested in climate change. I also do work in the Caribbean, and that is a place where climate change is going to have a huge effect. Katrina was the first hurricane whose intensity can be attributed to climate change. And again, I talked about the loss of the wetlands. There's various things that have changed in that, but at the same time, you do find out that there's been this tremendous that have changed in the environment that make the intensity of hurricanes so much greater. People in other countries, and I've looked at this, done this research, Latin America and the Caribbean take climate change seriously. We don't here because the part of the political apparatus has been devoted to keeping us from understanding the seriousness of climate change.
We are in a moment of peril.
Yes.
And I think art is some of the way that we transform that.
Absolutely. Well, I was talking about my father and his surviving Katrina. I have other poems that I've done that are even more focused in the Ventura County area, but this is one I happen to have with me. So it was Halloween, and I drove from the airport to my father's house in New Orleans East. It would be the first time I'd seen him, the World War II vet, since he came out in one piece from the hurricane. All along the way home, I couldn't stop staring at how cars and boats had been tossed around like the aftermath of a child bored with his toys. Inside the house that reeked of mold, I found my father, wearing his 80 years like nobody's business, bending over, intently poking at the gray flotsam like a beachcomber looking for nuggets hidden in the muck. Not much to say, not much to do, until the enormity of it all drove my father out to the driveway where the flash flood from the failed levee had drowned his car, foiling his getaway. In the now, I watched him, squatting on a plastic crate, like a man who had lost a war all by himself. Thank you.